Alrighty, so for all of you that had to witness all of my witty commentary as we began, hello again. Good morning, everybody. I do want to give everybody a heads up. We have some pretty bad weather here where I'm at in Oakland, Maryland. I feel like there's like a little tsunami going on and it's knocked out our power. So fingers crossed that that doesn't happen because we have a really good treat for you guys today. I apologize for those. I actually had to reschedule this session because I'm silly and got a bit overwhelmed with this month-long virtual summit and, messed it up. So I'm really glad that Mr. Essex was willing to reschedule this because this is going to be a great briefing. Who we have today here is David Essex. And, the reason why a lot of people struggle with the nuances with the facility and personnel clearance processes. It is extremely cumbersome. There's a lot of contradictions, trying to navigate the variations between the FAR, the NISPOM, and then throw in the new DIS and NIS system, which I still don't understand why they couldn't become more creative with the way these terms for these systems because it's confusing. But there is a lot that goes into it, but it's a huge component for government contractors. There's a lot of agencies that you can't even get your foot in the door unless you're going to have these cleared personnel. So here today, David's going to be talking to you about the industrial security basics. He is very open to questions. Unfortunately, he gets stuck with mine all the time. I'm constantly calling him and saying, please help me. And he's been great. He actually acts as a portable FSO because as many of you guys know, as a small business, it's very difficult to incur that expense, especially with somebody of his caliber. So he has multiple clients all across the United States that he helps with navigating this process. So I'm very confident in the information that you're going to receive today. And I know that nobody will leave this call regretting participating in it. So without further ado, I would like to welcome David Essex to the table. Again, this is going to be recorded. We encourage everybody to ask questions, engage, and I'll be monitoring the Q&A for him. So without further ado, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everybody. And thank you, Michelle. And I also apologize in advance. I am actually sitting in a hotel room down in Huntsville, Alabama. So I cannot control whatever external noises that go on around me. So if you hear anything, I apologize in advance. As Michelle said, my name is David Essex. I have been an FSO for about 20 years. 15 of those years working as a full-time FSO for a number of companies, including General Dynamics HQ and their headquarters office, and a bunch of smaller companies. I have experience on both DoD side and on the intelligence community side. But the last 5 years, as Michelle mentioned, I have been sort of a mobile, portable, part-time FSO for a bunch of smaller companies, those companies that don't have enough, I guess, bandwidth to take on a full-time FSO, but need sort of an experienced FSO to sort of help them navigate through this ever-changing, very fluid national security, industrial security program that's going on right now. There's lots of moves, adds, and changes. And, it just helps to have somebody who can sort of, I guess, keep up with it all. So with that being said, I will go into the slides. Oh, there we go. All right, so just a couple of terminologies, table of contents, a couple of things that we'll go over as we go through this presentation. Here are some of the key terms that you will see throughout the presentation. And these slides will be available to you after this presentation. So if I'm moving a little too fast or if you need to have the need to take notes, please, like I said, this will be available to you afterwards. So, all right, so for the industrial security program, the NISPOM is sort of the guidance that we use. It's sort of the operating manuals, the Bible, as I like to call it, for industrial security. They actually have updated one as of the end of last year. It is, as you see in the picture, the last iteration of this was in February 2006, and you can imagine how much security has changed since in the last 15 years. So there is a new one that has just come out at the end of December of last year. 32 CFR Part 117. It's a little wordy. I don't know quite why that's the name of it, but that is the latest and greatest version of the NISBOM. It's still, there's still some things being added into it, but it basically walks us through everything that we need to know in industrial security as FSOs in order to set up companies with their FCL, getting personal security clearances, and everything related to security. In order to obviously have a classified, to have a FCL, or what we call a facilities clearance, you have to start with what's called a Form DD-254. This is the form that is issued to you either by your government customer or by a prime, if you're a subcontractor, that requires you to have requires your company and subsequently your personnel to have access to classified information. So without this, you do not have a facilities clearance. So for those companies that do not have one of these needs to be issued to you in order for you to set up your facilities clearance. If you already have one and you're in the program and you have an FCL, you know this is the guidance that that your company needs in order to in order for your company to operate in the classified world.
Are you reading my chats?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You're good. I got it monitor. I just wanted to get some feedback from individuals. If you could put into the chat box, you know, who on here has a facility clearance and who is looking to learn more, just so I can kind of, you know, advise David too. And, you know, if you are possessing versus non-possessing, just so we can get a feel of the type of companies that are on the call. But I'll stop talking now. And David, you don't have to worry about the Q&A. I'll monitor.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't know if you were monitoring. So
I got you.
Cool. Thanks.
You gonna start talking?
Yep. Here we go. So clearances and eligibility. So there are three basic types of eligibilities. You have confidential, which is pretty rare, actually. I've only seen about maybe 3 or 4 of those my entire time as an FSO. But those are due periodic reinvestigations every 15 years. The two most common are the secret or the T3, where you get reinvestigated every 10 years. And the T3R is what we call the reinvestigation. And then the top secret, or the T5, which is probably the most common, is a periodic reinvestigation done every 6 years. And the T5R is the reinvestigation. It used to be 5 years for the T5, but now they increased it last year to 6 years. And the goal was actually to go in the other direction to sort of minimize the time between investigations. But at one point they got so far behind, they decided to move it to 6 years. And then the very rare one of the Yankee White, it's an investigation for personnel who are working with the president or the vice president of the United States, primarily for people who work in the White House. Polygraphs, you have your counterintelligence poly and your full scope, and then SCI access. So in order to get access to SCI, you must have a minimum of a top secret first. And that's normally something that is granted to you by the government customer because of the program that you are specifically working on. So continuous evaluation. So going back to what we were just talking about with periodic reinvestigations, they are moving in a direction of getting everybody enrolled in what is called continuous evaluation or continuous vetting, to where instead of periodic reinvestigations will still exist, but this means that between those 10-year time spans or those 6-year time spans, that the government will be looking into an individual's background at any point during the process. So because, you know, people can get into a lot of trouble within 6 years. And they have found that there's an inordinate amount of underreporting, that, you know, people are coming up against their periodic reinvestigations, and when the investigator does the background, they're finding out that, you know, they had a whole bunch of things that had gone on in their life during that time that should have been reported to the FSO. And the first question, you know, like somebody could have possibly had a DUI. And the first question is, did you report that to your FSO? And then you hear crickets. So they have found that a lot of people are not reporting the things that they should. So They are going to be doing continuous vetting and continuous evaluation on candidates. The goal is to have everyone enrolled into CE by the end of this calendar year. So, like I said, even though it's not a full scope of periodic reinvestigation, they will be looking into people's backgrounds periodically. It could be done at random, or it could be because they have a reason to. Levels of classified information basically follows the same thing as the levels of eligibility of confidential, secret, and top secret. And obviously, with top secret, the release of this material could gravely damage national security or foreign relations. Okay. Access and need to know. So access means to have the knowledge of, read on, or be in possession of classified information material. So need to know is always the tricky one. People often assume that just because they have a security clearance or because that they have eligibility, that all of a sudden they're entitled to just any information that's labeled at the top secret level or the secret level. And that's not true. You, on top of that, you need to be able to have what's called need to know. Just because I have a top secret clearance and somebody else has a top secret clearance, we could be working on completely different programs. The access that we have to the information. So you need to make sure that if you have a clearance, that when you're talking to people, it's not just about what eligibility they have, but make sure that they have the need to know and the level of access to have access to the information that you're sharing with. All right, the security databases. The current system of record is called DIS. The previous one, for a lot of people who are old like me, was called JPAS. We migrated over into DIS last year. And DIS is only a temporary holding platform. So we went from JPAS to DIS, and then there's a new system supposedly that's going to come online sometime next year. It's called NBIS, which is the National System. So that will replace DIS. So DIS, like I said, was just created to be sort of a stopgap system between the two systems, and hopefully that, like I said, they're supposed to be online next year. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Government and their timelines are always interesting. NIST is the National Industrial Security System. So DIS houses all the personnel security information, so people's clearances and everything else, where NIST houses all the information regarding a person's company, all of their related documents, anything, the KMP, if there are any moves, adds, and changes related to the company, all their corporate documents, all those things that DCSA requires in order for you to function in the program. So that's where all those documents are housed. Scattered castles is the equivalent of DIS for the IC community. The difference, obviously, between DIS and scattered castles is scattered castles is read-only. Industry does not have access to scattered castles unless you are at a government facility and unless the government customer gives you permission to it, where DIS is a DoD collateral system and any industry FSO can have access to it. And then SWIFT is the system where fingerprints are uploaded and sent off. All right, and then this is just a little bit of what I just talked about briefly, where DIS is a DoD entity. It is for collateral clearances only. Industry FSOs can have access to DIS to enter information and process clearances and update PII. Scattered castles is for the intelligence community and for programs. It is read-only to industry, and only government security employees of said agency can enter information into scattered castles. So even though as an industry FSO, you may get access to scattered castles if the government customer allows you to, unlike DIS, you cannot enter any information into it or make any moves, adds, or changes. It is read-only. So this is going to be a little rudimentary probably for some of you that already are in the program, but if you're not, just a brief overview of a facility security officer. Again, just somebody who handles all the security related tasks for your company, including establishing the facilities clearance for the company, Most companies, the FSO does not have to be a full-time person. It can also be somebody who's wearing multiple hats. The FSO can be a full-time or a part-time employee of the company, and the FSO does not have to be physically located at the facility, especially if it's a non-possessing facility. All right. And so an FSO, so you have two types of people. You have 1099 consultants. Sometimes that a company may hire somebody and they just want somebody to be their security consultant, basically, handling all the security work for the company, but there would be somebody within the company who's holding the FSO title. So if you would hire someone as a 1099 consultant, that person cannot be the FSO and they would not be considered key management personnel, but they can be an account manager in the DIS system. And then you have what you call a W-2 employee who can be the FSO in title, who will be listed as key management personnel and also be the account manager in DIS. How you choose to hire somebody in that for your company is solely up to you. I will say that DCSA is not a big fan of the 1099 consultant. And the reason being is that you could hire somebody to come in and be, like I said, do all the security work for your company, but they're not the FSO in title. And so they are not responsible or liable to the security program, meaning if you have a security assessment, the person who is the FSO is the one who is responsible for your security program, regardless of who does any work. And if there's any mistakes, that 1099 consultant has no liability and no responsibility to that program. So they would prefer to have somebody who is a W-2 employee, somebody who is actually employed with your company as a W-2, because then they feel like that person carries all the burden, all the liability, and all the responsibility of the security program. Adverse information. So this is what I mentioned previously about the underreporting. This is just a list of 21 different items that your employees, if your company is in the program, that your employees should be reporting to the FSO on a regular basis, or if any of these things apply. I always hated the title adverse information because it always gives it a negative connotation, as if everything that you're reporting is bad. But number 4, you have foreign travel, change in citizenship, if someone gets married, if somebody changes their name. So all these are different things that need to be reported to security. The one thing that is not on this list that is very brand new, that is there, and there's a policy that's about to drop on this, is cryptocurrency. If you have an employee who's invested in cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, because that has a foreign influence, that is something that moving forward will also have to be reported. I think what they're making a decision on is, where's the threshold? How deeply invested into Bitcoin or cryptocurrency do you have to be before it has to be reported? So that will be something new moving forward. Just foreign travel. Anybody who has a security clearance is required to report foreign travel to their FSO at least 2 weeks prior to departure. This way we keep a record of where an employee is going, whether for business or for personal reasons, because there's always adversaries out there who are looking for people who are cleared, and also to let the FSO know if there's a company that they may be going to that is on the ban list, right? A prime example, Cuba is a country on the list that if you have a security clearance that you are not allowed to travel to. And this also needs to be reported to the government customer, because they have right of first refusal. They can tell someone that they can or cannot go to a particular country as well. Social media. This is always an interesting one. So, what employees post on their social media sites is something that always needs to be monitored. Just like companies are not allowed to announce on their website that they have a facilities clearance, employees should not be announcing on their social media sites that they have a personnel security clearance. They should not be talking about what contracts they're working on, who the government customer is that they're working on, and so on and so forth. So that's something that always needs to be monitored and maintained, especially on a site like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably the biggest one on this list where people get a little more wordsy with about what they do professionally. And again, it's okay to talk about what company you work for in a very rudimentary example of the type of work that you're doing, but you never want to announce that you have a security clearance or the type of contracts with the government customers that you're working for. So on top of having a FSO, there's also the Insider Threat Program Senior Official, the ITPSO, and probably 95% of companies, the FSO and the ITPSO is the same person. So this person is basically required for establishing your Insider Threat Program and monitoring, educating and doing everything that's associated with it based on DCSA standards. They should be holding quarterly meetings, or depends on the size of your company. You can have quarterly meetings, you can meet once a year, can meet a couple times a year, so that it all depends on the size of your company. But basically just a basic overview of what's going on. The biggest piece in these is normally your program managers, because your program managers are the ones who come in contact with your employees every single day. Most people who work in the corporate office, they don't see the employees, they talk to them over the phone, they talk to them via email, but most of your employees are probably working at the government customer site, and your program managers are the ones who will have the most bandwidth and time with them, and they will see anything that needs to be reported. So they're very instrumental to your Insider Threat Program. And so you should be meeting with them on a frequent basis, even if it's not a formal meeting, just asking if you see anything different in a person's personality or changes. The other thing is for Insider Threat, your Insider Threat Program training should include all employees, both cleared and uncleared, because you do not have to have a security clearance to be considered a threat or an insider threat. And just a few facts regarding insider threat. And as I said, more than 1/3 of those who committed espionage had no security clearance. So that was just what I was bringing up, that you have in your company, because you have people in your company who still have access to your PII, even though they may not have a clearance. So just be mindful that all insider threat training needs to go to all your employees. Just some of the psychological indicators of what can cause somebody to be an insider threat. And again, no one of these things that you see on this list, could cause somebody to be an insider threat, but normally you're looking for a combination or a series or a number of things in and of itself. So anyone can be, but normally it's a situation where a lot of these indicators combined are what cause people to become insider threats. And of course, most times it's due to money. Somebody is in financial hardship, and so about 80% of people who do not get security clearances is because of financial reasons, because the government has deemed that person a risk. And so that also is, like I said, tied to your insider threat. I think Michelle's kind of mentioned this in the introduction. There's two types of facilities. There's a possessing facility and there's non-possessing facilities. And the simple difference is that a possessing facility is one that is allowed to maintain classified information at their location. Okay? A non-possessing facility will not have any classified information at their office location. Understand that means at your physical brick and mortar facility. Obviously, your employees working at the government site may or may not come in contact with classified information. All right, just a couple of facility clearance process FAQs, basically explaining what is a facility, what is a facility clearance, can a facility apply for its own facility clearance? That's normally the #1 question, and that is no, you have to be issued a DD 254. Either from the government or from another company, and they are the ones who have to sponsor you for your facilities clearance. All right. And does the facilities clearance cost the contractor? There's no direct cost. Facility clearances and personnel security clearances, that is all part of our tax dollars, right? And then how long does it take for a facility clearance to remain in effect? As long as there's a need for the contractor to have access to classified information. So as long as you have an active DD 254, then that justifies your need to have the facilities clearance. And of course, the time frame of how long it takes, typically it's a much quicker process than getting a personnel security clearance. So once the paperwork is submitted, I would normally say within 90 days or less, you could probably have your FCL in place. These are just the elements of the facility clearance process. So you, as I mentioned previously, you need sponsorship. You need a company to sponsor you for your FCL. Then this is just shows you, the second bullet point shows you some of the documents that are required in order to submit to the government to get the FCL going. There are two forms, the DD 441 and 328 that are required. The 328 pertains to foreign interests, so that just shows if you have any foreign relations, if you have any foreign ownership, if you have any ties to any foreign country. And then the 441 is just basically a non-disclosure agreement between your company and the federal government, making sure that you understand everything that is involved. And then the personnel security clearance, the FSO, the facility security officer, and the highest rank KMP must be cleared to the level of the facility. Meaning if you are if you're applying for a secret, then you have to have the FSO and the KMP at a secret level. If you're applying to a top secret, they have to be at a top secret level. Getting the personnel security clearance is normally the long pole in the tent these days. So, and if it takes time to get that, so that's why a lot of times companies will go out and try to find somebody who was already cleared, like myself, to come in and help transition help the company with the FCL process, and subsequently already have somebody who is cleared and doesn't have to go through that process. All right, joint ventures. So there's once you have an FCL, two companies can come together and do what's called a joint venture. This is very popular for what we call IDIQ contracts. So the JV is where they pool their resources, their employees, and they come together to form another company. So there's two types of JVs. There's a populated and an unpopulated. Populated joint venture acts like an actual operating company. It brings employees, its payroll, and performs on contracts using its own employees. It has cleared employees. An unpopulated joint venture does not have any cleared employees. There will still be an FSO and a KMP assigned to an unpopulated JV, but there will be actually no employees assigned to it. And this goes a little bit more into explaining what an unpopulated joint venture is. This is, again, like I said, very popular for what we call IDIQ contracts, where you're just going after particular work. And so you have a DD 254 that's assigned to you, and you're going after a particular work, and then until you get that work, there's necessarily no employees that are associated to that joint venture. And then it can go from an unpopulated to a populated JV. So when we're dealing,
before you go in for the populated versus unpopulated JV, can you elaborate a little bit? Because like how SBA is set up, most of the rules and regulations are geared to around unpopulated. Have you experienced any obstacles for people with transitioning from the populated to the unpopulated, or unpopulated to the populated component? Did I word that right?
Yeah, you worded that right.
Okay.
So yeah, the challenges in going from an unpopulated to a populated JV is again the personnel. You have to make sure that all the personnel you have the cleared personnel to move into a populated JV. Obviously, because it's still tied to a DD 254, and because it's tied to a classified contract, you have to make sure that when you're making the transition, that you have the necessary employees that are cleared to the level to work on that work. So I was about to get into, and this will help explain it as well. Both companies have to be cleared to the level of the JV as well. So if you have a top secret, if the DD 254 is at the top secret level, you can form a JV where one company is below the other, but then let's say you have a company that's at a top secret and the other one's at a secret. The one that is at the top secret will have to sponsor the one for the with the secret. They have to sponsor them to get their top secret. So the two companies have to have the same level of FCL.
Now, and does that justify them for sponsorship if they're intending to create a joint venture, or does the opportunity have to be like, do they have to be awarded the contract first? Because, you know, frequently see companies that are pursuing opportunities and they require it. Can they sponsor them at that time, even though they might not have been awarded the contract?
So you have to have the contract, you have to have, so in order to get into the joint venture, both companies have to be cleared. Now, when they start the JV, they do not have to be cleared at the same level. So that's why I was saying that you could have one that's a top secret and one that's a secret, but the top secret company would have to sponsor the one with the secret FCL to move them up. But both companies going into the joint venture need to have an FCL to start the process. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that answers the question. But the one question I was doing, like a lot of times they'll say that you can't sponsor them if you don't have the contract. Is there any creative ways that maybe if they're creating this joint venture to pursue an opportunity, any tips for companies that will justify the sponsorship? Like for instance, if you have another cleared contract or something like that. So kind of just giving tips to companies.
Right. So the way this particularly works is, in order for an FCL to take place anyway, you have to, so the way the FCL process works is the DD 254 is issued. And then with one company, let's say company A wants to sponsor company B, they would then give them what's called a sub DD 254 to company B. There's also a letter that's a justification letter that's associated with that. So the government customer has to sign off on the need for company B to be working on that contract. That's really the key to the whole thing. On top of the DD 254, if the government customer finds that there's a justifiable need for company B to be working on the contract, then they can move forward with granting the FCL. In the past, what used to happen is that one company would sponsor another company just because it was Tuesday, or just because they were buddies, and there was really no work that was being done by the company that was being sponsored. This is why within the last 5 years, they changed the rules where the government customer has to provide a justification letter that's submitted in the package to DCSA, saying that there is a need for one company, the other company that's being sponsored, to work on a classified contract. And so that's really so the DD 254 and the government justification letter are really the two key linchpins in a company getting that. But it's always, if you are looking to get into this field, you need to find a company that has a facilities clearance, that's willing to sponsor you for that. And of course, that your company provides a service on that contract that can be justified. The other thing is that the government is also locking down on what they call second tier subs. So a lot of contracts now, you'll have the government customer, you'll have a prime, and then you'll have what's called the first tier sub. And then, so to have another company come in and be a second tier sub, that is again something that the government is watching very closely to see if there's a need for that second tier sub. Joint ventures, FCL requirements. So basically, this is just exactly what I was just talking about previously, just some of the things that are required in order to form the joint venture to submit the package for the FCL. And then the hazards, this is just one example of the hazards of bidding as a joint venture. So you need to make sure that the company that you're going into business with, or that you are partnering with, whether it's just one other company or 2 or 3 or 4 companies, you need to make sure that everybody is on the up and up as far as their financial structure, as far as their facilities clearance, so on and so forth. So this is just an example of where of what you call a bad joint venture, and some of the issues that was denied. It was a protest, is whether the state was reasonable in determining that the JV did not qualify to bid on the task orders, as I mentioned, in an IDIQ contract, because it had failed to obtain a facilities clearance for the JV within the time required. So there are rules in place. There's a timeline that's associated with it. So just be careful and mindful when you're teaming with other companies. You need to make sure to do your due diligence and do your homework with that other company. All right, and then that's pretty much it. Any questions, comments, concerns, anything in the chat? Here's my contact information. If you have any questions beyond just this, you're always feel free to reach out to me. And Michelle, do you have anything?
Haven't you learned your lesson by saying that? Because I mean, I'm pretty sure he's going to have to change his email address because of all of mine. So one of the questions is, in an unpopulated GV, are members treated as a second tier sub?
No, they're not. So normally a JV is typically a JV is a prime DD-254. So the DD-254 is normally issued to the JV directly from the government customer. So in that case, you are considered a prime. You're not a sub. Now,
so, let's ask the question.
Can you have a sub under a JV? Then the answer to that question is yes. But normally the joint venture itself is considered a prime.
So what happens if you acquire a company that had a cleared contract and you are either keeping it separate or you're merging it? What is the process to which companies have to go through in that instance?
So if you're acquiring a company that has a facilities clearance, then there's two different ways you can go about that. You can keep if you're buying them out wholly, I think it depends on the terminology or the conditions in which you're buying the company. If you are adding them within the confines of your company, then you need to apply for the FCL needs to transfer to your company. If they're just going to be a subsidiary of your company, and then you do not have to apply for an FCL. They can keep their FCL by themselves, and you just be the parent company.
So how does that work with companies that have multiple tiered branches? Like I know in larger businesses specifically, they have like divisions, and sometimes they even have it siloed. The way they have those clearances, like it's like an apparent subsidiary, but they're under the same blanket. Don't they still have to do the process for those divisions?
So it depends, and this is where I don't have a concrete answer because DCSA makes that determination. Sometimes you can have a parent company that is not cleared, and then just their subsidiaries are cleared, and then you can have a situation where the parent and all the subsidiaries underneath them have to be cleared as well. And I think again, it depends on the business structure. So there is really no concrete answer to that. DCSA will look at the package and look at the circumstances, and then they'll make a determination whether the parent has to be cleared or not.
So, based on your experience, we all know the little debacle between SBA with their views on the mentor protege and the sponsorship, and that, the JV shouldn't have to be cleared if the mentor is. And then the NISPOM, and DOD is over here going, no. But I believe that there was a case, and I haven't even got to read it yet, that kind of favored SBA's language. What are you seeing on your end about that, with how these clearances have to take place in regards to, because SBA was trying to say, oh, if the mentor has the facility clearance, that should translate to the protege. Does that make sense? Or you've seen, what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in a perfect world, DCSA would like to have all the companies cleared, the parent be cleared, and the subsidiaries be cleared. The same thing on the small business side. I think they would like both to have the mentor and the protege cleared, but that's not, it's not always going to work out that way. So again, there is no consistent guidance on this. I find that they take them as a case-by-case basis.
So another question that we received is an unpopulated JV has no employees. So would I assume each partner and any subcontractors would have to be issued a DD 254 by the JV, correct?
That is correct.
So I know that SBA's work around, because with the possessing status, if it's a JV, it must have the FSO on the book. So SBA's solution was, okay, it can be an unpopulated JV, but you can have the one employee there. And I'm like, well, wouldn't that mean it's not unpopulated?
So unpopulated, yeah. So I think yes, the FSO and the K, there has to be an FSO and at least one KMP that are associated to the unpopulated JV, but those are overhead positions. Unpopulated means there's nobody charging to the actual contract. There's no employees billing to the government customer on the unpopulated JV.
Oh, and that kind of clears it up. So it's not really that.
Yeah, it's not. They call it unpopulated, but basically it means there's nobody charging to the government customer on the contract, like you would on a populated JV, where you have employees working at the government customer site and they're actually billing the government customer.
All right. Well, that is because when they made that comment one time openly, they didn't really clear it up from that perspective.
Yeah, I know the wording, they call it unpopulated, even though there's two people assigned to it, but there's nobody billing to the government customer on the unpopulated.
So we got a question and says the current guidance from SBA is that both members of the MPA must be cleared, but the JV itself did not have to be cleared separately. Yeah, that was the guidance, but there was like kind of an issue saying that like the JV should have to have a clearance because essentially it's a new entity. But apparently there was a hearing that, favored the concept of if both companies are cleared, then the clearance should translate. I apologize if I didn't word that properly. I haven't been able to read it yet, so I'm not really sure of what the outcome was, but my understanding is that DCMA was trying to say that the joint venture had to be cleared, but SBA is saying that's redundant if both entities in the JV are cleared. And it was kind of like a back and forth, but I think that SBA won in that most recent hearing.
Right.
Well, I mean, not SBA, but their interpretation of it.
Right.
The company that was obviously the protests and everything like that. But I haven't got to read it yet, so I don't want to speak too much out of turn, acting like I know what I'm talking about. I just say that it happened. So, yay. So has anybody else on the call been kind of experiencing issues with the transition to the new system? As somebody that has had to play around in there a little bit, like oh gosh, it's so confusing. Anybody have any questions about the transition or running into any sort of obstacles?
Obstacles are
crickets, or you guys are just typing slow? I don't know. But I mean, did anybody have any other issues? I know that some people were indicating that they were pursuing a security clearance or they were interested in pursuing a security clearance. I know a lot of times what companies complain about, and this kind of seems weird to me, like a prime contractor can sponsor somebody under their DD 254, meaning that you're working on cleared contracts, but they can choose not to actually sponsor you to have a clearance, which in my opinion seems like they're purposely trying to control the market because they realize if they sponsor this company, then they can go after the stuff on their own. So they're kind of keeping them under their thumb. Any tips for companies that might be in that situation?
Yeah, so I mean, and that's a very good question, Michelle. Yeah, there is sometimes no cost benefit for a company to sponsor another company for an FCL, because you are correct. You could partner with a company, you would sponsor them for an FCL, and then when that DD 254 comes up for recompete, you could be competing against that company to win that contract, or they could go and partner with somebody else. So there's always that chance, and it's a risky business. And so there are some companies that will drag their feet about sponsoring another company. Now, the one advantage that small companies have, and this is one of the reasons why the larger companies, the General Dynamics, the Booz Allens, the Lockheeds, the Raytheons, and Northrop Grumman's, the one thing that the small companies do have are the set-asides. They are service disabled, veteran owned. They they are Black owned, Asian owned, Native American owned. They have all those little caveat next to their names. And you know, those companies get set aside contracts. And so obviously the big boys cannot go after some of those contracts. So that's what entices them to want to sponsor smaller companies. So they could say, if your company is, let's just like in the 8A program and they're a minority owned company, you know, General Dynamics might come to a company like that and say, hey, I want to sponsor you for an FCL, or I want to partner with you so we can go after this particular amount of work. So that's the one thing that sort of keeps the playing field clear. But you're right, it's not always incentivized, but for the larger company to want to sponsor the smaller company, or the prime to sponsor the sub. And so you just have to navigate around that. And hopefully you find a company you deal with that has integrity, that will, you know, stick with you. And they can, even though DCSA would probably have a conniption if they saw it on paper, but there can be a clause in there that says, if we sponsor you for a facilities clearance, or we partner with you, you cannot bid against us, or, you know, like on a recompete.
Basically a non-compete. Yeah. A non-compete. So you know, for those companies that are out there that may be looking for a sponsor or looking for somebody to sponsor them, is there any sort of organizations that kind of is like a network? Because obviously, like you said, you can't post if you have a facility clearance, you're supposed to be, there's all these rules and regulations. Where do companies go if they're interested in connecting with other cleared companies to try to establish that synergy?
So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of security organizations out there. There are organizations like NCMS, which is really probably the largest one out there, which is really designed for companies that have FCLs, and that's normally where most FSOs receive their training and so on and so forth. There's companies called like As Is, which deals more with physical security. So there are organizations. There's ISWIG, which is the Industrial Security Working Group. So there are organizations out there that you need to just go online and partner with. And if anybody ever needs a list of what those organizations are, please feel free just to email me. Actually, I probably should put a slide in there on the next time to just list what some of those organizations are that you can go out and reach out to find out what the guidance is and to find other companies that are cleared. But typically in any, especially within NCMS, you're not belonging to that organization unless you're a cleared company. So that would always be a good starting point.
So that's the one that you're still working with, correct?
Yes, correct.
So as somebody he's actually a trainer, and are you still running one of the chapters? Yeah,
I'm the treasurer for my local chapter, and I'm also a mentor within NCMS.
And as somebody, because in my past life, I worked as a security officer, and I was actually a member of NCMS, and I really enjoyed it. They give a lot of great information that comes out. They do a newsletter, because there is a lot of stuff that's flying off the shelf in regards to it's changing, like rules and regulations are changing at an alarming rate. And I don't know about you guys, but the ones that have read the NISPOM, like it's not exactly like, you know, a great read. So they keep you up to date on the changes. Like, so when the personnel clearance changes with the reinvestigation of when those activated, like that stuff happens so quickly and we all get really busy. And it's kind of like, because I can tell you right now, if you miss these deadlines, it is going to be detrimental. They're not exactly forgiving about it. So, you know, being able to stay up to date and in the loop of some of these things and watching it down the pike, because you do not want to miss deadlines when it comes to your personnel or facility clearance processes, because in many instances, it leads to you starting the process over, and that's horrible. And if you make minor mistakes, not super forgiving, as a person that dealt with it many times. So if you guys do check it out, like I assure you, you will not regret that. But that's where I was leading with that, David, is because I thought it was a great organization, and that's where I've kind of crossed paths. Is that why you're out there right now in Huntsville for a training under that blanket, or is it specifically for your client?
Well, right now it's specifically for my client here in Huntsville, but so like I said, I had to come down here because one, I have an assessment with my client in Huntsville today, but I also came down here for counterintelligence briefing with the FBI. So
can you also explain that how with attending different types of briefings like this actually plays favorable in your assessment? Because
Yeah,
when they're
so
determining, go ahead.
yeah, so one of the things that if you have an FSO, you really want your FSO involved in as much thing as in as many things as possible. Because during your assessment with DCSA, you have things that they call enhancement points, and you get credit for participation in organizations, you get participation in trainings, you get participation in on a multitude of different things. So the more you have an FSO who's involved in across multiple platforms and so on and so forth, the better that is that enhances your security posture with DCSA. So, and the other thing is you're only as effective as an FSO with your ability to be informed. And it's in industrial security right now is so fluid. There's so many moves, ads, changes, and things going on. I probably spend at least a quarter of my time in training, just in front of DCSA, getting briefs, going to seminars, attending lectures, and so on and so forth, because what was guidance 6 months ago has completely done a 180 and gone in the other direction 6 months later. So you really need to make sure that you have somebody who is, and that's one of the reasons why I always recommend probably not having somebody who holds multiple hats as an FSO, because with all the training requirements that are out there and with all the things that are moving, you really need somebody who's really, their sole focus is on security and making sure that they're keeping aware of what's going on.
Yeah, because it's a lot.
It is a whole lot.
And it's also a way for those trying to branch into the defense or find a company that is cleared that's kind of in your arena. I have attended a couple of those briefings. Typically, they are classified briefings where you have to be able to prove your security clearance, but you get a lot of information that you would not have received on the streets. I know the ones that I attended were done by either the FBI or CIA or some sort of intel representative. And, they were really interesting to attend. But, people are constantly asking me, especially within the intelligence community, it's like, how do we break in? How do we know? And it's like, you really have to be in that network. And this is the best way to be in that network, is to develop, get involved with these groups. You'll meet other companies that are in that circle. And, because at the end of the day, people do business with people. So take that into consideration. I know we're coming up on close to the end of our time, but does anybody else have any other issues that they're experiencing? I'm starting to feel a little bit bad that I was the one that just struggled so much with the system transition. I was like, man, I guess I wasn't paying attention that much, because it gave me a migraine. But, we got a lot of quiet people here, but we covered a lot in this session. And, I hope that you guys all really enjoyed it. But do you have any last minute comments that you wanted to share, David, with the attendees?
So I just want to say, if it's something that there's a lot of bad information out there. So to Michelle's point, if you're looking to get a facility clearance, if you're looking to jump into that realm of industrial security, God bless you. But again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to contact me. If I don't know the answer to the question, I will always direct you to someone. I'll hunt it down or I'll direct you to somebody definitely who can answer your questions. But, if you're going down this road, the one thing I always recommend is make sure that you have, I know a lot of business owners, when they first start their company, they're very small and they don't have the bandwidth to take on an FSO, or they are their own FSO. And again, the program is just getting so big these days that I would highly recommend that you bring somebody in, even on a part-time basis or as a consultant, to help you sort of navigate the issues, because I'm telling you, there's a lot of people who run into brick walls trying to get through that process, and they don't really have the experience or the knowledge to try to get through it as exponentially as possible. So
can you kind of explain a little bit of what you provide? And then are you still, I know last time we talked, you were pretty packed out with clients, but are you at a position where you might be taking on more clients now? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I never take on more clients than I can handle, but I have people that I team with, I partner with, who work with me. So if I don't have enough bandwidth to take on a particular client, I have other FSOs that I work with who can help out, or people that I'm currently mentoring or training to work with me as part of my company. But yeah, I provide basically what you call cradle to grave FSO security support. So I will handle everything that is involved in the industrial security program, from the briefings to the trainings to maintaining all the personnel security clearances, helping you set up your FCL if you don't have one, and just navigating all the issues that are out there in the universe. So that's pretty much what I do. And again, I primarily work for smaller companies, again, that don't have the bandwidth for a full-time FSO, but you need a qualified, experienced FSO to come in and sort of help you. Because look, most owners of companies don't want to be their own FSO. They don't want to take the training, because that's the other part of it. You have to keep your certifications up. You have to take the training. And anytime the government introduces a new platform, you got to learn all that. And most owners just want to go out and grow their business and do business development. So they'll hire some dumb schmuck like me to come in and run their security program. And yes, and this is what I do. So if you're looking for a good qualified FSO, feel free to reach out to me. And like I said, if I can't help you, I definitely will hook you up with somebody else who can. So.
See, and you guys heard that. That's one of the reasons why I really like to have David come and speak, is because exactly that. A lot of times businesses, they just don't have the means to hire somebody on full time. And it's difficult to find somebody that you can trust and that is not going to take advantage of you. And I 100% am behind him as a person that has benefited from his services and his knowledge and expertise personally. I wholeheartedly endorse him, because I have a hard time with recommending people. Like, it takes me a very long time to feel comfortable. But so if any of you guys are struggling and you want to make sure that there's somebody that you can trust and that will definitely get you set up right and knows exactly what they're talking about, he has my endorsement. So if that means anything to anybody.
Well, yeah, thank you. And your Cash App will be in the mail first.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no.
No, and thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, look, for somebody like me, integrity is my number one business. And you know, your reputation as an FSO is only as good as your integrity level. So this is what I do, and I'm not in. And Michelle knows this about me. This is not an ego-driven thing. I'm not chasing a title. I don't care if I'm the FSO, if I'm the assistant FSO, if I'm a security consultant. I'm just here to help you get, navigate through your security program. I'm not chasing a title or anything at this point in my career. I don't have anything to prove to anybody. But yeah, like I said, but if you ever need, even if you just have questions, to feel free to reach out to me, and I will provide you with any guidance that is necessary. So.
All right. Well, with that, this is the last call. If anybody has any other questions, but if not, I will.
Look, and I see your mother out there. Hello, Miss Shirley, and happy birthday.
So I appreciate that. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And with that said, I'm signing off. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, everybody.